Hey, I'm Joe Smiles from Fat Loss S.O.S, and like the video, subscribe to my channel, then you can get notifications on everything unbiased opinions and scientific knowledge on fitness, health, lifestyle and fat loss, and it will help you to iron out all the misinformation that's rampant on social media at the moment. So today's video is about maximizing muscle size, and you need 4 principles. And is one of them time under tension? No, that's way down the line. 4 principles, and I'll briefly talk about each one of them. So principle number 1 for maximizing muscle size is mechanical tension. Mechanical tension involves putting the muscle through enough tension so that it adapts to the stress that you're putting it under. You need to work at a high enough intensity to volitional failure, which means volitional failure means training to almost failure, where you have 1 or 2 more reps in the tank, but your technique is still okay, but you're not quite going to complete failure where you can't do another rep of the exercise. And training at approximately 80% of your 1 rep max with a 2-second eccentric on the exercises on the reps, and training to volitional failure is the best way to develop mechanical tension that spills into strength, that then spills into hypertrophy. And this has been proven in this study, which is called the Maximizing Hypertrophy, and it's a systematic review in 2019. The second principle for maximizing muscle size is metabolic stress. You develop metabolic stress by training your rest periods and increasing volume. So rest periods, you want to, if you're training in certain rep ranges, you want to have your rest periods that are in relation to the 3 energy systems, which is the ATP PC energy system, the glycolytic energy system, and the aerobic energy system. And you want to play around with reducing or doing more, reducing the length of your rest periods in relation to the rep ranges that you're using, and also building the volume of training that you're doing to create the metabolic stress. So it's best to train each muscle group between 10 and 20 sets per week. And when you're doing compound movements, you can kind of half some of those sets into the smaller muscle groups. So for example, if you're doing bench press, you're still using triceps. So you don't necessarily have to do between 10 and 20 sets for triceps per week, because you're using them in a bench press exercise, for example. And the other thing is that you want to take advantage of muscle protein synthesis, especially when you're a non-steroid user, because your muscle protein synthesis lasts between 36 and 48 hours, whereas when you're taking steroids, your muscle protein synthesis can last up to 7 days. So you can do all your 10 to 20 sets in one go, and you're still building muscle throughout the week. Whereas if you do that as a non-drug using athlete or trainee, you will probably overtrain very quickly. So the best way to develop metabolic stress is to reduce and break up the number of sets you do throughout the week per muscle group, so you increase the frequency of your muscle group training per week rather than doing it all in one go. And the third principle for building maximal muscle size is damage and intramuscular swelling to the muscle cells. When you exercise, you increase inflammatory markers such as cytokines, which are proteins that signal to cells to the immune system. There's different types of cytokines released during exercise, and these include interleukin-6, C-reactive protein, and tumor necrosis factor alpha and beta. And the tumor necrosis factor alpha and beta, they promote inflammation and they respond to damage and injury, and they cause apoptosis, which is cell death. However, some cytokines are anti-inflammatory, and when you exercise, the inflammation releases white blood cells, and starts to repair the tissue damage. Now, interleukin-6 can then become an anti-inflammatory marker instead of a pro-inflammatory marker, which it starts off as, and that also helps to increase muscle repair. Myokines are also released, and they're also signaling molecules which are released during muscle contractions. So the more muscle contractions you have, the more myokines that you release. So they also have inflammatory effects, and they break down fats into lipolysis, which is the breaking down of free fatty acids into the bloodstream that then get used up as energy. Myokines also promote muscle growth and repair, and they also stimulate satellite cells, which are stem cells, which proliferate on muscle cells, and they turn into myoblasts, which cells that build and repair muscle fibers and make them thicker and stronger as they respond to mechanical tension and metabolic stress. They repair damaged muscle cells. So you train and you damage muscle cells, and then satellite cells, which are stem cells, proliferate, which means they multiply in number as the stronger you get and the more that you train and the more volume that you do and the higher the intensity you do. So this is where metabolic stress and mechanical tension come in, and they help to build muscle cells and regenerate, and the satellite cells regenerate themselves so you can develop more cells the stronger and the more you train. And the fourth way of maximizing muscle size is through Mechano transduction, which is where you have mechanoreceptors, and they are electrochemical and biological sensory receptors that stimulate your bone, muscle, ligament and tendon tissue to grow and get stronger. And muscle fibers have mechanosensory cells that are stretch mediated and tension mediated sensory components. So the more stretch you put through a muscle and the more tension you put through the muscle, so training at higher intensity and moving a muscle through its full range of motion creates sensory systems, and this is done by nerve fibers on your muscle cells. So one neuron will talk to another neuron and ion channels open where chemicals like calcium, potassium and sodium pass through and respond to the mechanosensory responses that you're putting through the muscle. So this triggers a metabolic process which leads back to the second one, metabolic stress. And the more times or the more volume you put through the muscle, the more you increase the mechanotransduction, and causes more protein synthesis, which means the muscles become bigger because they're responding to stretch and tension mediated sensory cells and molecules. So to just wrap up this video, I hope you found it interesting. Subscribe because it helps the channel to grow, and I can also keep giving you more and more unbiased information. So to recap, we have mechanical tension, where you have to train at a higher intensity and towards volitional failure. You have to have metabolic stress, where you train more volume and you monitor your rest periods or reduce your rest periods as you get stronger. You have damage to cells and swelling of intramuscular cells, which creates an inflammatory response during exercise, which then creates a pro-inflammatory mediators to repair damaged tissue and develop satellite cells, which then turn into myoblasts, which then repair muscle fibers and increase muscle protein synthesis. And then the fourth one is you have mechanotransduction, where you have mechanoreceptors that respond to mechanical stress. So the higher the mechanical stress or the higher the repetition maximum leads to more muscle protein synthesis through opening more ion channels between nerve cells, which then allow more muscle fibers to contract, which leads to bigger and stronger muscles. Hope you found it interesting. Leave some comments and like the video. Thanks.